Did you know that your chances of admission are already doubled if you apply to a university that has a rolling admission basis? That and 4 other tips on how you can get admission at a Canadian university even if you have a low GPA is what we are discussing today, so stay tuned. What's up, everybody? My name is Sadia. I'm a Ph.D. student here in Montreal, Canada, and in today's video, I want to talk to you about 5 tips that you can use today if you are planning to study in Canada, if you're planning to apply for an MS or PhD admission, and even if you don't have a very high GPA. So as I was saying, look for universities that have a rolling basis admission. What do I mean by that? These universities don't evaluate applications on fall term and winter term basis and rather have a rolling admission basis, which means they evaluate applications as they are received. So some universities in Canada, for example, Acadia University or Mount Allison University, have a rolling admission basis. So apply to universities that have this system of rolling admissions and you already increase your chances of admission with a low GPA. This is especially beneficial for students who don't have very high GPAs. If you want to know more helpful tips like that on a regular basis, head out to my website sadiakhaf.com and join this friendly community of wonderful students and stay tuned for some helpful tips to arrive in your inbox. Now here's my tip number 2, and listen very carefully to this one. Look for universities that have a low barrier to GPA, that have a low requirement for submitting your applications for admission for MS or PhD applications. Some universities in Canada, like University of Toronto or University of British Columbia, will already have a high GPA cutoff like 3.0 or 3.3, and even more difficult thing would be that the average of admitted students can be even higher. For example, the average GPA of admitted students for some years at University of Toronto or UBC can be as high as 3.8, 3.9, so you have very little chances of admission there. So if you look for universities that already have a lower GPA cutoff requirement, for example, Simon Fraser University, Acadia University, University of New Brunswick, University of Waterloo, a couple of other universities that I will leave somewhere here on the screen with their GPA cutoff requirements, go for those. But not only that, look for the average GPA of the admitted students. Google that thing before you apply to any university. Look what is the average GPA of admitted students to know your chances of getting accepted there before even you apply, because even if you do pick universities that have a lower requirement listed on their website, but if the average GPA of admitted students there is quite high, your chances of admission there are still going to be quite low. So go for universities that don't have as high average GPA of admitted students. Now here's my tip number 3. Look for programs that don't put a lot of emphasis on GPA and rather put more emphasis on other factors. For example, the MBA program at University of Western Ontario puts a lot of emphasis on your work experience and on your letter of recommendations. So if you have a great work experience or if you have letter of recommendations from renowned professors and they have given you very good recommendation letters, that might be an option worth looking into for students like you. Also remember that if one program has a strict, very high GPA requirement at one university, does not mean it will have the same GPA requirement or the same emphasis on GPA requirements at all the other universities. So do a comparison between public and private universities. This information is publicly available. You can search things like how important is GPA for the MBA program at University of Toronto, for example. When you search things like that on Google, it will give you opinions of other people, blog posts from other people, and it will let you know how important of a factor GPA is. You can also directly search for universities and programs that don't put a lot of emphasis on GPA, and it will lead you to programs and universities that put emphasis on other factors like your experience, like your letter of recommendation, like the university entrance exam itself, like your GRE, GMAT scores. So look for universities that put emphasis on an overall application or some other factors other than GPA at least. Now here's my tip number 4, and this might be the most underrated tip anybody is ever going to give you. Play to your strength. Not everybody needs to become a doctor or an engineer or a lawyer. What is your strength? If you don't have a high enough GPA, what are you good at? If you're good at sports, go to a program that values sports. If you have good management skills, go to a program that values management skills. If you have good research skills, and research skill does not directly translate to GPA. I have so many students, I know so many students who have excellent research skills, excellent engineering research skills, but have very bad GPAs. So if your research skill is your potential highlight, then go for a degree that values research. And once you have identified your strong suit, your highlight of your entire career, entire degrees, everything, your strongest point, highlight that in your application. If you have a great GRE score, make that the central theme of your entire application. If you have good research skills, make that the central theme. If you did a great internship somewhere, make that the highlight of your entire application, because that is going to eventually overshadow your GPA and your weaknesses in your application. So find what is the strongest reason you have for getting admitted to a certain program, and then build your application around it. So many people make this mistake. They have certain strengths that are just hidden away somewhere down the line in their application, and nobody pays attention to that. So find your strength and then tailor your entire application around that, around highlighting it. If you need any help with that, contact me. There will be a link in the video description. You can book an appointment with me. We can schedule a meeting and session, and I can take a look with you and I can teach you how you can highlight your strengths in your SOPs, your CVs, your overall application process. But you have to build your application around your strengths, not the other way around. My fifth and final tip for you is ask yourself why you don't have a high enough GPA. Were there any mitigating circumstances? Do you have any learning disabilities? Were there any circumstances in your personal life or in your educational life that played a role and hindered your progress towards finishing your courses or getting a good GPA? If you have a good reason behind it, if you have a good story to tell behind it, do tell it. Mention that in your application, and if you can explain those mitigating circumstances, a lot of the universities will understand that and will give you a chance despite not having a very high GPA. You have to be able to balance it well though, because sometimes some students can invent fake reasons or describe real reasons in a way that can make it sound a bit fake, that can make it sound like an excuse. So you have to be very careful explaining that. Normally you will mention it in your statement of purpose. When you do mention that in your statement of purpose, make sure different parts of your SOP are very, very balanced. Don't end up explaining one thing too much but then not explaining enough about some other things. You have to make it really, really balanced when it comes to different parts of your SOP. So do watch that, because I reviewed real SOPs from real people, and make sure you don't make the blunders, the big mistakes in your SOPs that these people made. Go watch that, and I will see you in the next one.